Hello, and welcome to the Social Psychic Radio Show featuring Jason Zook. In uncertain times, we must change our focus and priorities. This show will highlight social justice issues with the goal of expanding minds and increasing unity, love, and mutual respect for ourselves and our planet. We support the Black Lives Matter movement. Our show aspires to promote social spirituality, which simply means that by coming together, we can solve any of our problems, including the goal of bringing an end to all forms of hate, discrimination, bias, or oppression. We must protect our environment, reform our criminal justice system, and protect every citizen from police brutality. When we come together, it becomes possible to bridge the gaps that plague our society and divide us from within. We the people means everyone.
Hello and welcome to the Social Psychic Radio Show. This is Jason Zook. It's a great pleasure that I welcome special guest author Forrest Rivers to the show today. Understandably, COVID-19 has been a harbinger of mass chaos and unspeakable tragedy for many people. However, our guest, Forrest Rivers, an author and inspirational speaker, maintains in his newly released and highly uplifting book, COVID-19 and Humanity's Spiritual Awakening, that if we're able to still our minds and fully be within the immensity of this moment, we can start to see a different narrative emerging, one of hope, personal empowerment, and spiritual awakening. Forrest's uplifting message is one that is desperately needed in these times of great suffering and division. Please welcome Forrest Rivers to the program to discuss its urgent message for humanity. Welcome to the show, Forrest.
Hi, Jason. How are you doing?
Great. I'm excited about us being able to get into this topic today because I feel like we're coming out of a dark place that we were in before. And now that we're starting to reemerge, it's like a renaissance to me. Energetically, when I read people, I feel a lot of people in a place of rebirth, in a place of new beginnings. And I feel like that's a strong message. And I think your book touches on the same type of theme that I'm feeling. And I want to ask you, what caused you to write your book?
Yeah, absolutely. So my main premise is really to just say that this period has tremendous potential to help us become more aware and awake human beings. When I wrote this book, it was, I started writing it in March of 2020 when we all went on lockdown and we were in the grip of a lot of suffering. Of course, you had people who were getting sick from this new virus, people who know somebody who died from the virus, all the job layoffs that we saw, the anxiety of being at home and not as connected to our friends and family. You had all these very real exhibits of suffering. And there was a lot of fear and there was a lot of anxiety, understandably, during that time. And so I sat down to write this book to sort of give people a more positive and inspiring perspective with which to look at COVID. So I wanted to say, it seemed like what our media wanted to say is, here's all the suffering, and that's the whole story. And what I wanted to say is, that's just the start of the story. Here's the suffering. It's very real. It's here. It's profound. It's impactful. And now what do we do with this suffering? To
heal from it.
How do we use this to heal from this, right, Jason, to heal from it and to make us more, to really evolve as individuals and as one human race. So I wrote this really as a way to sort of be a counter to the dominant narrative of fear and anxiety and anger and division and conflict, which are all things that we saw emerging during the first 3 or 4 months of this period. Yeah.
It's terrifying.
So I wanted to inspire people.
And it's nice to think of the positive, uplifting nature of what you're proposing, or what what we're discussing right now. Is there's a dark side to the moon, but there's also the light side that we look at all the time that faces us on Earth. So let's take the positive from this and let's look at that for a little, and let's be happy to focus on those. It'll illuminate.
Absolutely, Jason. Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. And Jason, I would point out that, and I point this out in the book, that there were a lot of positives that came out of this, despite, and again, I don't want to downplay the amount of real suffering that people were going through. That is indisputable. In fact, I couldn't have written this book without starting at the place of suffering. That's the basic premise. But out of this, there were so many interesting things that came out of it for our own spiritual awakening. One thing that happened, and Jason, I'm sure many of your listeners and many of your viewers can relate to what I'm about to say. One thing that came out of this was a search for meaning. And of course, for any spiritual path, we have to start with that search for meaning. It seems like, and I'm not saying things are perfect now, but prior to COVID, right, it almost seemed like we were in this like trance of complacency and ego and very robotic in our day-to-day functioning.
Yeah.
And I think for the first time in a really long period, we were forced to sit with our thoughts. We were at home, we were in lockdown, we were more socially distanced. At least a lot of us were socially distanced, and as that was happening, we had to kind of like consider, what do we really want to do with our lives? Do I want to be working this job? Do I want to be doing this? Do I want to be doing that? And you're seeing it reflected right now, Jason. It's all over the news now. People are saying, well, we have this job shortage. Worker shortage.
Yes.
People don't want to return back to what they were doing because they've got a glimpse that, oh my gosh, there's a whole different way of being right now. And honestly, Jason, I cite many examples.
That so well.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think so many people, right, can relate to that. And I know in the book, I cite numerous examples of people who use this period folks I encountered who wanted to use this to delve into a deeper life of meaning. So there's a cool story in there about a AT hiker I met named Noble. That was his trail name. And he gave up his office job. He's like 55 years old and was just like, I can't do this anymore. I had all this time to reflect and think to myself, and I just want to be out in the woods. And I want to, I've always wanted to hike the AT. I'm not getting any younger. I better do this now. I talked to two other, I have a story in the book about two other friends who decided to move off the grid. One of my friends from Colorado and his wife, and they're doing it in Utah. And
wow.
Another story of some friends I have who decided that they wanted to really delve into gardening. They're friends of mine from Nashville, and they want to devote their life to farming. There's stories of this that came out during the pandemic of people who decided that they want to take a more soulful path and live with more purpose. Another thing we saw come out of COVID, and I talk about this in the book, is many of us had to stare down our fear of death, right, Jason? That's a big one, right? Well, no matter, we couldn't run from it. I mean, and we couldn't just say, it's something that's happening. We tend to do this a lot. It's happening over there. It's not here, so no big deal. It was in Italy, then it was in India. It's in America. It's in Spain. It's in Britain. We all had to come to terms with our fear of death. And the mystics of every spiritual faith basically say, you can't learn to live life fully until you can start making terms with death. And so that was it's kind of an ugly theme or a dark theme,
wow.
But it doesn't have to be.
No, but I'll say this, I remember just from a personal perspective, because I had cancer in 2018. So my doctor's like, stay home, self-quarantine as much as possible. So here I am in Florida where everything is unrestricted, and I'm basically in a bubble, but I get to do all my work from home. So nothing changed in my life other than me being antisocial, and I call myself the social psychic. So you can imagine what that feels like. But I grew a lot about myself. I grew a lot inwards, but I remember sitting on the couch watching the numbers, and people like, don't watch the media. And I'm like, look, I'm in reality right here, and I'm not going to depart that reality. So I had two best friends from college. They each lost one parent each. I mean, luckily nothing came home to me directly, aside from some family members getting COVID. I did not get it, but I remember sitting on the couch and having personal fear of the unknown, of what's going to really come. Where is this going to go? It was horrifying to think about, and I prayed about it and meditated on it. I found myself inside myself. I grew, I forgave, I let go of, I purged a lot of negativity from the past, and I feel like I'm more enlightened within myself now. And I was spiritual to begin with because of the psychic mediumship work stuff I do. So I don't fear death because I communicate with deceased loved ones.
to not only that, but that's beautiful, but to actually you yourself having faced it down with cancer.
Yes.
I mean,
It's kind of crazy. I just kind of like glossed that over. But the reality I meant to say about all that is
huge, powerful.
it was just like how I developed my aptitude for it. I compartmentalize things in my life, and I don't look at them as like a normal person would. So I kind of mentioned that to bring background into it, but I don't bring it up to talk about it the whole time because I was able to overcome it. And it was stage 1 kidney cancer, but it was something I lost 55 pounds after that and changed up everything else in my life you could think of. The only thing I didn't change my haircut. But yeah, I mean, I feel like the examples you're talking about, I feel like this is kind of like where we were forced to leave our comfort zone. And when you're forced to leave your comfort zone, you know where you wind up. There's no limits. There are so many amazing things you can accomplish now. And I think that's what I think the theme of what your energy is showing me is that it's unlimited capacity. There's so many things we can accomplish in such a unique way because of what we've been through.
And here's another example. So besides facing down our fear of death, besides looking for more meaning in our life, more people than ever have been expressing an interest to connect with nature. We were stuck in our homes. And, Jason, I read this crazy statistic recently. It said the average person spends 97 to 99% of their entire life inside, not outside and not in nature. If you stop and think about that for a second, think about how much connection we're missing, how many lessons we're missing, the sheer wisdom of being out in nature. You don't even have to go far. You can have a garden in your backyard. We're not talking like you don't have to live in the mountains like me or, live on,
that must be beautiful.
It's beautiful, but you don't need that. You need to just, a simple garden in your backyard does the trick. You can bring nature into your home. I think a lot of people were exploring that over this period. And we kind of got to sit back and realize, as we're assessing what means something to us, we realize a relationship with the earth is one of our most profound, if not, let me rephrase that, our most profound spiritual connection, because we are of it. We come from it. We are of it. And there was a recognition of that. I talked about in the book how this period made us have more gratitude, right, in our lives. It's funny. And Jason, you just went back and said you have friends who each lost a parent, right? So when something that profound and that sad and tragic happens, suddenly the little things don't start to matter as much. I think
I shut down. I didn't do production. I didn't do podcast episodes. I was doing my basic things I had to do for my lawyer job I do, but I was shut down otherwise. It was hard to function during those dark periods of time when my friends lost their parents and they were close in time to each other. It's like, you don't like broadcast it on social media when you shut down, but it's a way to really put everything in perspective. And even though I don't fear death because I communicate with the other side through whatever way it happens, I don't still like, you still got to process the human side. And I feel like the emotional side is really what's the hardest. Absolutely. The emotional toll is taken on every one of us.
Absolutely. Absolutely. For sure. So I just see this as and the last thing I talk about a number of things in the book. I also talk about the creative outlets. I compared this period to what we may have seen during the hippie counterculture back in the 60s, where you had, I mean, people forget, why was all this art happening? Because there was a lot of suffering happen, and it forced a lot of people to turn inwards and start exploring their own spiritual path. You had people getting into Eastern mystic religions. You had people getting into Christian mysticism, people exploring psychedelics and exploring the outer realms of inner space, all of these things happening. And out of that came a huge renaissance. I loved how you used that earlier on in this interview. It was like a renaissance of like creativity and raw spirit being expressed. And I think we're in the middle, we're in the start of a renaissance. And when we look like 20 years back, if we can take a longer perspective, I think we'll look at COVID as one of the most significant events that shook us out of our sort of over-identification with the physical the physical realm. We're so much more than just this dimension. And Absolutely. I think as your show very, very deeply and beautifully explores, you know, we're like, and it's far out. It's awesome. It sounds far out, but it's real. It's real. You know, it's real. And I think that this event has put us more in touch with the fact that there's maybe more than this physical plane. People have had more people than ever collectively. We've had to consider that as a real possibility that, hey, maybe this is just, the body isn't all who we are.
You're about to,
you know,
I'll have to share one point. As a medium, I've learned over the years from readings I've done and the information that comes through those readings that I personally believe that our shell is just a shell. We're like avatars, that it's our avatar on this planet, and that we're 99.9% made up of energy, which is spirit. It connects us to our loved ones when they cross over. That's why they can communicate to us and leave signs behind like synchronicity and everything else. And that when it comes to the death process, all the death process is the spirit is upgrading outside the body and moving on to the spiritual realm. You reconnect, you connect with a greeter when you cross over. Your like loved one that predeceased you greets you on the other side. And you're like literally 100%. You're back in union. But then you get the opportunity of watching everyone left because of the love connection you have with them. It's like the umbilical cord, so it connects us all. And so we're their reality show to them. So like
Jason, so all of that is 100% truth to me. Like that's something I always thought was just common sense. That I love what the Hindus call. I love what the Hindus say. The Hindus have a cool name for it. They call it dropping the body.
Yeah.
So when you die, you drop the body and you continue on. And I'm firm, you know, so if you look at this whole process of like that, there's a spiritual plane and the events on the spiritual plane come to manifest in the physical plane.
Yeah.
And that we take forms constantly, we're constantly reincarnating. The spirit is transmigrating.
You know synchronicity really well, don't you?
Oh, of course.
Okay, well, I'm gonna show you some synchronicity, real life. You know what this is? Play-Doh. Ask me why I have Play-Doh in my hand. Because I went to Target on Sunday with one of my friends from college, and we went to Target, and I decided to be a little child and get Play-Doh. But this is example right here. You're talking about our bodies. Here's our bodies. It's like Play-Doh, and we go in these bodies, and when our bodies end, we move on to the next spot, and we leave the Play-Doh or the body behind. I don't know. Something made me show you this with an image. I don't know why, but
no, I like it.
Simplistic as that is, you know.
So if we look at COVID, right, Jason, from that perspective, the soul awareness and not the over identification with the body, the whole thing makes perfect sense. Why it had to happen the way it is. And again, it's not minimizing. I'm not trying to minimize.
Not minimize death. No, I get it.
Yeah, and all that. But if you think about it, then that means this whole thing had a huge purpose. If we're here to incarnate and to go through this process to work out our karma, and I look at it as the whole point of life is to come to greater awareness of our
purpose
unity
and unity.
The purpose, the greater unity of the entire realm of being, call it God, oneness, the transcendent reality, whatever term you're comfortable with, the Tao, you know, our idea is to come to full awareness of our inherent unity with it.
Completely.
And this thing COVID makes perfect sense then. It happened as a way to force us out of that ego consciousness. We've been so overly identified with our physical realm, and we've been so overly identified with our worldly possessions and things, and and all these trivial all of these trivial pursuits, that money, power, fame, that don't really have any bearing on our soul lives, who we really are.
It doesn't go with us. It stays here.
It doesn't go with us. It can't. So
that's why you got to nourish your inner child and do self-care and develop those relationships with others in your lives and make things meaningful. Yes. And all the things, I know you already know that, but I'm just saying for our audience, if there's people there thinking while we're talking, they're probably saying the same thing within themselves. They're not like just listening to us talk. They're probably participating in this conversation wherever they are listening to us, because the topic, it eviscerates so much emotion on either way you look at it. I'm not even talking about the disparity between people who think it's a hoax and a conspiracy theory and then all those other things. I mean, that's a whole other planet. We're just talking about the reality of where we're living right now, the times we're up against, and what we're doing.
Yeah, what we're doing, the petty conflicts that we had, like you mentioned, Jason, they don't matter. They don't matter. In the grand scheme of things, in the level of soul awareness that you and I are talking about, it does not matter.
Racism should not exist when it comes to soul purpose. Like, we're all the same soul. We're all the same spirit. Our bodies don't matter. It's like the color paint on a car. Are you going to judge someone because they drive a blue car? No. Why would you judge someone by the color of their skin? I think it's ridiculous. It's ignorance to the extreme. It needs to be handled.
This time you're white. Last time you were black. Next time you might be native. Next time you might be, whatever. But if we approach it from that plane, I mean, we've got to be able to see that this period has real potential to unite us.
Amazingly,
if we just don't get lost in all of this division, and a time to empower us and to get over our own fear. I think there's a lot of lessons that we can take from this. And my question, I guess, to you and to everybody else is, how do we keep that level of awareness that people were feeling during the last year? How do we cultivate that as we start returning to a new normal?
That's a great question. I'll say this, my opinion on that is, I think we have to take what we've learned and not lose sight of it, not put it in the rearview mirror and not put it on the shelf. You got to practice what you've learned from now, the awareness of who you are in your life and what your purpose is and what your goals are and whatever it is. I'll give one example. I've celebrated the fact that I haven't been around toxic people in my life that were previously there. And now I've got a distance, right? And now people are coming back trying to reach out. And I'm like, I don't think I'm going to respond. I think I'm going to wait. But you know what? That's my choice. And it's not a negative choice. It's just that I want to simplify my life right now. I don't need the negativity from anyone else's toxicity.
That's an incredibly empowering decision. And I was just going to say that one thing that that example of not surrounding yourself with toxic people, that's something that we can all do. We can we can take little things that we learned from this pandemic and just, they don't have to be even huge. They don't have to be even huge things. It could just be like, hey, I remember that time, last year when I felt really disconnected. Hey, next time I'm in the grocery store and I see an elderly person that looks lonely, or
help them,
I'll go say hi to them. Or if they need their help with their groceries, like go help them. It could be little things like that, or it could be even bigger things like deciding not to surround yourself with toxic people, or, deciding you're going to get involved with volunteering, or, something. But I think there's lessons for everybody. Forgiving people.
It's that's something that if we all exercised it and went to the gym and practiced forgiving and letting go and purging the negativity, like, I really do think that could heal a lot of our anxieties within ourselves. And I think it really help us live a better quality in our existence with each other. And it would help a lot of things, right?
Couldn't agree more. Absolutely.
I mean, I feel lighter now than ever before. Not only I lose the 55 pounds, but I forgave like 5 people in my life from my past. They don't know it, but I did it anyway, spiritually. But I let go, and it invigorates you. It gives you so much strength, like to welcome new energy in its place, new people, new beginnings, new relationships.
Well, and I love what you just said just now, and then earlier in this podcast was the letting go, and then you even use the term rebirth. And I think one of the biggest points in my book is to say this is a real period to become aware of our interconnection, become aware of our search for meaning, to become aware of our fear of death, to become aware of our inherent, that inner child, that creativity that lies within us. And, and out of all of this, it could be our rebirth. I think this really could be a rebirth for so many people. But there needs to be a lot of us out there promoting that message, because the message that's dominant still right now is one of sort of like nihilism, and when's the next pandemic and how much longer till humanity self-destructs? No.
The variants are going to be out there, and then you've got new ones. Yeah, I mean, it is what it is, but it's we gotta get a counter out there, right, Jason, of a more positive message that, hey, starting with this show and your book.
Exactly. Here we are, and I think we're doing it. And that's really why I wrote this thing, to say, hey, look, there's some very positive things that still came out of this. And, and I would point this out too. You need dark periods to be able to appreciate the light periods, and to be able to appreciate more transcendent moments. I mean, like you can't appreciate. And then that's a big point I make too, is we have to stop thinking in terms of duality. We can't get too attached to our lows, too attached to our highs. You need darkness for light. You need light for darkness. You can't appreciate summer without winter. This idea of non-duality,
You
and
got to have the one to get through to the other and to continue to grow. I mean, we only grow from when we are challenged. We challenge ourselves, we challenge each other, or something externally challenges us. And you could say that COVID externally challenged society, humanity, the planet, individually on a micro level, a minuscule level within ourselves. It went to the core of everything and everything. If you really think about it, I feel it went deep to the core of who we are within ourselves, and it went deep to society's core. And even though there were divisions created and negativity created, it also brought out a renaissance, a rebirth, the beauty of what our unlimited potential can be.
100%, 100%. And I would go even a step, not even further. Just I would add to that and just say this: maybe when we look back at this, we'll look back at COVID as one of our spiritual teachers, which is a really weird, I know it's a really weird concept to even think about. Well, how could a virus be your spiritual teacher? But,
it's part of nature. That's the crazy part. These things exist in nature. That's one thing I wanted to bring up. The one thing not negative, but the one fear I had was how COVID could take your life so quickly compared to other diseases or other illnesses or other conditions, right? I mean, all of a sudden during this pandemic, people were dying within 2 weeks, sometimes even sooner. And I was like, whoa. And that's the part that was heavy. It's like an anchor, right? But then you get to the bright side of things and you say, okay, so from all the negativity we've all shared collectively, now we also have deepness. We can understand compassion and empathy better because we've been through some amazingly difficult and isolating and horrifying times. I mean, the word horrifying rips through me because I'm also thinking social justice stuff too, not just the virus, but we also live in a society where we have all that other stuff that happened. We don't have to get into the deepness of it, but just to say that that's a flip side of it, a societal aspect of it. Because of our society being as divided as it's been for as long as it's been, we're having violence, we're having, social unrest and racism and all these things we earlier touched on. I feel like COVID shed light on a lot of that. It brought like a bright light into a dark space and made us facing our ugliest sides of ourselves and trying to, grasp what is going on in our reality because of that.
Yeah, we had to face down, like you just said, we had to face down a lot. We had that election, a toxic election. We had without getting too into depth, we had like you said, major protests with in Minnesota, actually in all the cities across the country and across the world. We had to reckon with what we've been doing to the earth. We had to reckon with the really kind of dark underbelly of our modern capitalist system. There's a lot of like dark things that came to light, but like you said, it exposed it for us. And the only way we start moving forward
is by addressing it and acknowledging it.
Acknowledging it. It's there. There it is. Now what? Now we can start moving in a more positive direction towards a higher consciousness.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that that's something that's going to help shape the defining next decade or two of our lives, is between the social stuff getting handled with the other aspects of lives and in everything with our spiritual awakening. I believe that's definitely an accurate depiction of where we're headed and where we are.
Absolutely.
For sure, without hesitation. I'm looking at your book, and one of your titles for chapter 12 I really liked, and I want to ask you this. If the earth could speak, what do you believe it would say, and why?
Yeah, so I had a chapter, and it was basically about if the earth could speak. And what I was basically saying is, if the earth could speak, she would say, and this was during the pandemic when I wrote this, that, hello, I'm here. Not only am I here, but I'm important. You can't exist without me. In fact, you are me. There's no separateness. So the idea that you can conquer me is absolutely absurd notion. And now that your cars aren't running all the time, and now that you're confined in your homes, I hope you take a second to realize how important I am. You can see the mountains for the first time if you're in India. You can see, in the cities. You can see. You don't need to go out in smog. I mean, you don't have to go out in masks with all the smog in LA. I hope you're starting to realize that 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 you are a part of me, and that what you're doing to me is poisonous and toxic. And I think if the earth could speak, she'd say something along those lines, that how do you not acknowledge me as sustaining your emotional, physical, and spiritual being. And I think COVID, again, may have brought us more awareness about our relationship to the earth. Wasn't that interesting that in one of the most darkest, fear-ridden times, we were causing the least amount of harm to the earth? Industry more or less stopped around the world for at least a 6-month period there.
It's true.
I mean, think about how profound that was, right, Jason? For the first time, the earth could breathe. And for the first time, we could actually be in tune with her vibrations, with her awareness. We could actually see like the damage that we've been causing. What an interesting time. It was almost like we had some kind of like reset. And I don't mean it I don't use the term reset.
Time out. How about time out? We got a chance to hit time out and see what would happen if everything stopped for 6 months.
Yeah. And guess what?
For the earth itself, its ability to replenish itself in just a shorter period of time when we're not, destroying it through our human activity. Maybe
we should do this. Hopefully it doesn't take another pandemic, but maybe we should have 6-month resets every 4 or 5 years where we just stop industry, Well, and I was
gonna say, we have a side of our country that's so anti-environmental that trying to get a minute of that again would be a big moment of silence challenge. Like I don't know. I'm just of a different caliber. I believe we definitely need to take this environmental stuff and up it a lot and do a lot more.
If we don't foster some semblance of an eco consciousness, if we don't have any awareness of our relationship to the earth, who I would argue is our most sacred, and
it's our literal home.
Sacred.
It's our home.
It's our home, and it's our.
And where are you going to go if you destroy your home? That's kind of like, where are we going?
That is. It's our home. It's our church. It's our deepest.
What do you do with this? It's like, how could people not agree, no matter who you are, where you live, or what you are, that this is something we have to take care of now? It's not a necessity for tomorrow or next week. This is like a 5-star fire going on, a 5-alarm fire going on. You're sitting on your couch watching the newscast and texting people on your phone going, I'll figure it out later. Like, no, you're about to burn, engulf yourself in destruction. Let's pay attention to this fact, and let's not imagine that we're in some other reality. We're in this one with this plan. Yep. That's how I feel. Like that Line 3 pipeline that I've been watching about, where they're protesting that out west in Minnesota, I should say. That concerns me. Like these native plants, native lands and stuff that are being destroyed. We've got to have greater respect for Mother Earth. We've got to have greater respect for our treaties with our Native American indigenous tribes. And we've got to respect nature. You can't destroy nature. We've had too many Exxon Valdez or Gulf oil spill. We can't afford that. I think
out of everything that we could have learned, Jason, from the last year, that's what sticks with people the most out of anything, is this idea of the absolute necessity to begin addressing the way we're treating the earth. And I hope that that's the number one thing that we take away from this, because to destroy nature is to destroy ourselves. Simply.
It's like cutting your arm off. For what purpose? Cutting your head off. What are you going to do next? No, it's nihilistic. Yeah. It's ineffective in every layer. And I'm glad that you wrote your book, because I feel like it could shed light on a paradigm shift. That's what you're identifying. You're literally bringing the call of embracing a new paradigm, taking off the old glasses, putting on the nice new ones that are fitting real nice on you. You can enjoy yourself in the mirror looking at them, but it's a new way of looking at things. And I feel like it's a necessity.
What I would call it, and it's not only a necessity, but it's like what I would describe it as. It's beyond a necessity. It's just a part of our next phase of evolution, and it just so happens that we're both sitting here, Jason, and we're both addressing it. It's a spiritual evolution, and it's funny because I bet you when historians look down the road, it's going to be interesting, right? 30, 40 years. What will they call this period you and I would call it like an inner revolution or a consciousness revolution. But it's very interesting. What would historians call this paradigm shift? I have no idea. But we both know, and I think all your viewers and listeners know, that COVID was maybe the latest. It didn't start with COVID, this inner revolution or this shift in consciousness. It started far earlier. But this is just one of those events that's pushing it along. And I bet you there'll be more to come.
Oh yeah,
COVID won't
sure.
be the last major event. It may not be a pandemic. It may be, climate change should be enough of one of those events, if we're being honest, that should push us in that direction too.
Something in international relations always scares me, that we're going to have some repeat of history, have another type of conflict or something, which I pray we don't. But,
I hope not.
We're not in a vacuum. Just like the earth is our home, our society and humanity and all the things that plague us as humanity, it rears its ugly head. And we've got to fight the same battles over and over and over and over, it seems like. So it's like, if I was an alien or another life form, and I was like circling the planet in my, far advanced technology, I wouldn't land the craft. What are you going to do here? We're killing each other. Think about it. We kill each other like so stupid, and we kill our planet. And most of us are only after things for ourselves. There's no empathy. There's, at least hopefully with this whole new thing that we've got going on, there's more awareness, empathy, and caring and compassion. But
I wanted to take the time to say that, like, first of all, it would make no sense for an alien to land here. And it would make absolutely no sense because we're already destroying ourselves and the planet, like you said. But I want to give a positive thing to your viewers and listeners. The fact that we're doing this, right? That you have this show and you have countless thousands of listeners and viewers tuning in, it shows, right, that there's an interest in a new paradigm shift, that there's an interest in that inner revolution.
100%.
And that's what gives me hope is, right now it may be 1 or 2% of the population. I don't know what it is that are taking an interest in this. In 10 years, it might be 5% and 10%. You just got to keep building numbers. And when you consider that time and space from that soul perspective we've been talking about, Jason, time and space, this
irrelevant. Doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
Time doesn't exist on the other side. It's a human creation.
It's a human construct. We're not in some kind of race then. We will continue to evolve because we have to, because it's part of our karmic unfolding.
I agree with you. Think of it this way. 100 years ago plus, there were spiritualist communities in the United States and around the world that dealt with these topics of new agey kind of stuff. And that stuff's been around. Edgar Cayce was like the 1920s and 30s, different psychics, Nostradamus, the 1500s. So prophets, those things. But think about it this way. When you think about what we're talking about here, like your book and the concept that we embrace, basically, because we talk about these different things, I feel like that's kind of coming on its own now. Modern logic tied into the traditionalist principles and concepts are woven into this new movement, I guess you'd say, a renaissance for spirituality.
Yeah, I really love that term. I think that's maybe the best term is a renaissance.
It is.
I think that's what we're seeing. Because it's not like we've never seen this before. Maybe a renaissance might be even different than a revolution. A renaissance is saying that we're returning, where a renaissance suggests that there's like a cycle where we shift between, it's like more of a cycle. And now we're emerging back into a cycle of light and awareness. Even the Hindus believe that there's a cycle of things. They have 4 cycles. There's a dark period. And then, you come out of the Kali Yuga, the dark period, and you have a light period of awareness. And then you start to gradually lose those spiritual principles again. Then you enter another dark period. Then you come out in light. And that could just be the cycle of the universe, and right now we're seeing, we've gone through a pretty dark period. You could argue maybe we're hitting rock bottom in our consciousness. And the only way we can go is now a leap in our evolution.
You say that, and I have to just say this. We also have ice ages that could reemerge. We've got when you think of the pandemic, it was horrific and it was chaotic. But when you think about what our planet could really do to us or what could happen, with catastrophes and all these other crazy things.
An asteroid or something.
An asteroid. Crazy. Just like I don't know what the release of this UFO stuff's going to be like with the Department of Defense and how that's going to work with government stuff. But I feel like that's something that might be interesting coming up in the next few weeks, that we're going to hear about some revelations that they are actually acknowledging in government reports. If they do a government report, they're not able to do a government report unless the facts are substantiated and investigated properly by federal resources. So anytime you see a government official speaking in front of a microphone about UFOs and they're doing it without, laughing or running away, there's some levity to that. So I think there might be some paradigm shifts going on there too.
That would be can you imagine how profound that would be to find out that you and I probably both already know this, and your listeners and viewers do, but imagine if we found out. I mean, I think it's absurd not to think that there's not other life out there and that they haven't, visited out here, but that's just the sheer chances in this universe. But imagine if we were to find out that there was that there were other life
intelligent
forms.
life.
Yeah. And then not only was there other intelligent life, but they had actually visited here, and they're more evolved, and they're not only technologically, but spiritually as well. Like, what is, that would be a titanic lead to a titanic shift in our evolution. So you're absolutely right, Jason. COVID may just be the tip of the iceberg in terms of consciousness altering events. Yesterday was COVID. Tomorrow it might be finding out we're not alone in the universe. That would, who's to say, right? But
how's that going to shape everything that's going on in our current climate?
Oh man.
I mean, how does that change the stroke of racism at that point when you start realizing that we're all one race, and then you see there's other alien life forms? I would think that would change some minds at that point, hopefully. Maybe not. I don't know. We seem to repeat.
I would hope so. Nations wouldn't matter anymore. Race wouldn't matter anymore. Ethnicity wouldn't matter anymore. It would be like there's humans, and then there's another whole alien species. But right now your listeners and viewers are going, man, how do we get to talking about aliens?
Here's the thing I got to share with you though. We're actually in normal parameters right now talking about all this stuff. That's the aspect of how amazing things have changed in paradigm shifts. 2 years ago, I would never, you don't hear people mutter the word alien and be taken seriously. And now you got government people doing it, and we could discuss it. And the reality is it's not that far off from reality. We're on the cusp of big paradigm shifts beyond what you've, what we've touched on today. There's going to be other stuff. What about artificial intelligence? What about our technological improvements? And what about that? And there's so many things that we could embellish on, but it's a lot.
Oh gosh, absolutely. Absolutely.
How about giving credit to medicine and science for creating the vaccines that got us out of the pandemic in part, or helping? And I know people are critical of vaccines, but I'm not. I'm very happy that I got vaccinated. I'm grateful.
Sure.
And that it's at least helping with what we're dealing with, where it was before just taking countless lives. Like, we're finally starting to take control of the situation.
Yes. Yeah. And there's a lot of those things that we can look at that came out of this that we can look at and be like, pretty amazing. And there's some things to be grateful for. And
I want to ask you this.
Yeah.
Looking at your personal experience with COVID-19 and everything with the pandemic, and you were able to write your book, what's the most transformative thing that you went through that you've never shared with anyone before, personally, for yourself?
So I would say during this that's a really good question. I've given all these interviews on these podcasts and radio shows, and no one's asked me that question. That is an awesome question. So what's the most transformative thing that I've gone through during this? Something simple that everybody can probably relate to. Having to address my own fear. Going to the grocery store. That's not something that should be fear-inducing. And I remember at the very beginning of the pandemic, going down to the grocery store and just being filled with fear all the time. This was in the very beginning, April, May, June.
Oh yeah.
And wondering if I was going to bring home COVID, every single time I wondered about that. And for me, I as everybody else had a face down too, it was like, where's this fear coming from? How do I address this fear? And that's part of the reason I wrote this book too. It was kind of
therapeutic.
Therapeutic. Yeah, so that was pretty transformative. And then I'd also say, this is going to sound really weird, but hearing my sister, she works in the ER, telling me about all of the deaths that people had suffered. She was seeing up to 150, 200 cases a day at one point in California when she was working in the ER. She's an ER doctor. And hearing her tell me all of the different ways that people were dying, horrific ways, particularly early on when they were putting people on the ventilators.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember one time her just telling me the stories, and I remember just like, having like tears in my eyes and sort of breaking down, hearing her tell me these horrific stories of watching numerous people die left and right. And that had a transformative impact on me too. I think that may have contributed to writing this book as well. The thought that, oh, well, I guess this is real and this is how it is now. And this is where we're at. And those were definitely some transformative periods. I think those were the two big ones, just something simple like the fear at the grocery store.
It's huge.
And then hearing my sister's firsthand accounts of people dying of COVID. And I knew a lot of people, by the way, who got COVID. I didn't know anyone personally who died of it. So to hear my sister's accounts was pretty,
it goes to the core. I think you answered that amazingly, by the way. Thank you.
Oh, yeah. Good question.
And you raised a really great point. I mean, I think it's the human experience, our individual human experience. We all have an individual recollection of what happened based on our own experience with it, right? So your book is a great example of our ability to share collectively our individual experiences and kind of look at it in a way from a macro level, but then also a individual level as well. It's kind of like a mirror. If you think about it, for the soul to look into itself and share your own individual experience with it, reflect back on it, and kind of get awoke by that spiritually or understand our bigger picture. That's my interpretation of it.
You'll be really cool, as you were just saying that, is to go around and maybe I'll do this. I don't know, or some of your viewers or listeners can do this, is to go around and once this thing's fully passed, let's say 6 months from now, and start collecting from random samples of people their recollections and how they feel they grew the most from this period.
Absolutely.
Have them share a story or two, like the question you just asked me. What was one of your more memorable, maybe memorable is not the right word. I like what you said, transformative moments you had during this pandemic, and what was, something you feel like you really learned when you came away. I mean, I would love to hear those responses. And you're right, it's a mirror, because I bet like every response you would hear, you would be, looking into a mirror on yourself. You're like, well, that's how I felt too. Like when I said that you had fear at the grocery store, I saw you kind of perk up and you're like,
absolutely.
I totally relate. I
remember ordering my food for certain periods of time because I just didn't want to leave the house. And I felt fear kept me home, but fear also shaped my mind to improve my internal stuff so that I could move forward with whatever is coming now. So I feel like
absolutely. It made you realize that, hey, for all I know, I could die tomorrow. And, am I really doing the kind of work on myself that I would be, knowing that I have so on and so long to live?
And I'll just say this, you did bring up the one point. I had cancer the year before, so I had to face death then for 3 months. And then I had that handled. And then a year later was COVID. It was like, okay.
That's
so what I guess most of us were dealing with in the pandemic, I kind of had a head start with that. And then I had to do it again. But I think everyone kind of faced their own mortality, is what I'm trying to say. Like, that's a reality.
That was the reality. And I think we'll be better because of that. I
agree with you 100%.
Especially because our society, we've always run from death. It's something that we don't even really want to, it's kind of shunned away, it's hidden away.
I agree with you. We're already coming to the latter part of the interview. I can't believe how fast this goes. It's like when we talk about these type of topics and we can be so passionate about it, the human construct of time, it loses it. We're already at the end of the show. It's like crazy. I want to ask you this though, because I can ask you more questions. One of them would be, if you were to share with our audience from your personal perspective and reflecting on your book, what would you say to someone who's interested in picking up your book to read it, that they should look for in terms of a message that you would really want them to take with them after they read the book?
Absolutely. The major message I would want your listeners and viewers to take from this book is that in even the most seemingly negative or dark periods, there's always a silver lining. And that no matter how dark things get in your life, there's always, always, always the possibility, in fact, the inevitability of light at the end of the tunnel. And that I hope that what they take away from this is this feeling of inspiration, that you always have the ability to empower yourself to transcend your fears and to transcend the darkness. That is always possible, and that's always within your grasp to make that choice. And I hope that people take that message to heart from this book, that out of the darkness comes the light, and not to lose faith and to remain inspired that you can still take control of your life and evolve.
That's so poetic sounding, but absolutely accurate. And I feel like I connect exactly with how you phrase that. I think it's extremely relatable. The light at the end of the tunnel, that's something I personally have on my fridge. My mom got that out of the magazine 20 something years ago, and then she gave it to me during COVID so I could know and look on my fridge and know that the light's at the end of the tunnel. So it's kind of interesting that you share that. I was going to go pick it up and bring it over. I'm like, no, we're in the interview. I'm not going to do that.
Well, what a beautiful, it's a beautiful synchronicity. What a beautiful like metaphor too. Light at the end of the tunnel. I mean, it sounds cliche, but I mean, that's literally the nexus point or like the confluence of life and death and the passing into a new realm. And
it is. It's very symbolic on a deepest level possible, right?
So why not apply it here to our own like rebirth in the here and now? So.
I use the cocoon example when I talk about the last year of my life. I was talking to an old friend, and I was bringing up something from June of 2019 that I was like, oh, that was last year. And they're like, no, that's 2 years ago. And I'm like, oh my God, it is 2 years ago. It's like being in the cocoon for a year, and then you come out and you emerge as something else, like, from the caterpillar to the butterfly. We all spiritually emerge into spiritual butterflies, and that can maybe be a sequel to your book someday.
That's beautiful.
First off, how can our readers find you?
Well, so you can find me on my website at forrestrivers.com, just FORREST rivers.com. And that's my pen name and speaker name, stage name. And you can find me there. I have a little blog on there, and I have a contact section. You can write me. And the book is available, COVID-19 and Humanity's Spiritual Awakening. It's available on Amazon, and it's also available on Barnes & Noble and in Kindle and paperback editions. And you can also find it through my independent publisher, Conscious Living Media. So Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or Conscious Living Media. And, you can check me out on Facebook. I'm always, can have a conversation there too. So hope you reach out to me. So, yeah.
Excellent. Forrest, if you could be a spirit animal, which spirit animal would you be and why?
That is, again, a question I have not been asked, but it's a
fantastic one. You want me to go first? I ask it at the end of most of my shows.
Yeah, you can go first.
I have two parrots, and I live alone. So my parrots were my lifeline during the pandemic. They kept me social and talking when I wasn't on the phone with friends or Zooming, right? Zoom calling. But I always go by spirit animal for owl, because I believe in the wisdom is important to me, and the 360 ability of seeing everything and not just being limited in scope of things. And I also feel like the quest for wisdom, that's like my thirst with my show and just in general. And spiritual wisdom and physical, it's all different realms.
Oh, I love it. I love that response. I guess I would say, because of I've had some very beautiful experiences with them in the past, especially on top of mountains, where it's my favorite place to be. I feel most at home on top of a mountain. Would be an eagle.
Eagle. Beautiful.
And the eagle, of course, is just divine messenger. It's in many native traditions. It's literally you're literally communicating with the divine, and it has that all-encompassing perspective. It's beyond past, present, future. It has the whole eagle's eye view. It's just pure wisdom and awareness. So I guess I would choose to be an eagle.
I love that. I want to thank you for coming on the show. I have really enjoyed this interview. I don't even call it an interview. I call it a conversation and an exchange of amazing ideas and perspectives, really. But I really appreciate it.
It was a lot of fun.
It was tremendous. I really do love it. I'm
Hey, when the aliens do make first contact with us, we'll be sure to have another conversation on all this.
I would love to welcome you back on anything you want to come back and talk about. I really do think I really enjoyed our dialogue, because you offered a very unique and keen insight of a lot of things I already, connect with. And then you can express it in such a way that I feel like our audience can relate to it. So that's powerful. Messages are powerful sometimes, and having the ability to express that message concisely, but also in a way that others can pick up on it. And that's why we're here.
Well, hey, I'll say this final thing. Your viewers and listeners are very lucky and fortunate to have you. You're very unique, and the show is awesome. So keep it up.
I just want to thank Forrest Rivers for coming on the show today and sharing his knowledge and insight and perspective with us. COVID-19 and humanity's spiritual awakening is now available. Check this out. This isn't just something you read. This is something you really digest and think about and reflect on. And I highly recommend it. Not only can you tell from our interview today, just a broad perspective and gain understanding of many things. But I, from my own perspective at least, believe a lot in positive thinking. And if you think of our perspective that the light was at the end of the tunnel, and that we're into a new rebirth and a new renaissance, and amazing things are about to come, that we're not going to get hit by a train, and that we can stay positive. Positive thinking can do so many things for the human soul, the spirit, and the mind. And we're all mind, body, spirit. So stay positive, pick up this book, check it out, and keep an open mind. Because we're through so many things already, and we got so many amazing things ahead. So stay positive. When you stay positive, anything's possible. Check out Forrest's website, forrestrivers.com. And until next time, can't wait to have you guys back. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Social Psychic Radio Show. Don't forget to join us for another episode next time. If you enjoyed the show, we'd love for you to subscribe, rate, and give us a review on iTunes. You can also check us out on Facebook, and don't forget to visit the Social Psychic YouTube channel. Until next time, it's a big world out there. Keep an open mind, embrace your paradigms, and know that the universe is always yours to explore.